With another WrestleMania now officially in the rearview mirror, it seems safe to say that I have heard a lot of the same complaints that I hear every single year. This is the worst WrestleMania ever, blah 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 should have won, and is it just me, or does the hype just not feel as real as it should this year? It seems on a near annual basis that there are less and less fans jumping aboard the hype train. But is this a legitimate gripe, or is this just another example of fans complaining for no particular reason? Well, that's a very good question, one that I pose as the topic of this episode, because today... Okay, let me begin by saying that WrestleMania hype is not a thing that we can measure with facts and statistics, it's just something you feel. And naturally, what one person feels can differ from what another person feels, and neither one of them is necessarily right or wrong. But at the same time, there are nuggets of information, little bits of truth out there that might change how one feels about a particular situation. And so, while I'm not saying that anybody's incorrect for thinking what they think, I am hoping that you might think about just a little bit more. Okay, so with that being said, where exactly should we begin this analysis? Well, I say we should start on Saturday night, as in Saturday Night Live, that is. Now, I don't remember by who, but it has been said that the problem every current SNL cast has is that they're compared, and they come up short, to the cast that came before them. Today's talent is going to have people longing for the days of Sandberg and Purnell, who had to live up to the legacy of Myers and Carvey, who themselves had to endure being called nowhere near as funny as Murray and Murphy. Tomorrow's icons all start today in the shadow of yesterday's. Now, sure, you could be quick to dismiss this as mere nostalgia bias, but the truth is, it's a lot more complicated than that. Now, I've already covered nostalgia in a previous episode, which you can watch after this one. But as for today's video, I simply want to specify that in order for a legend to become a legend, it takes time. After all, it's hard to judge a run if that run isn't complete yet. Furthermore, we also have to remember that with each new generation of talent also comes a new generation of fan. And all fans, all humans, are taught very early on how to identify things. That's a pretty bird, that's a fancy card, that's a nice dinner. That's an SNL cast member, that's a WWE wrestler, and this is what WrestleMania hype is. This goes on, of course, until those definitions get challenged. And as a result, we can either accept and incorporate this new definition into our own, or we can fight and resist it. And if we do that, and WrestleMania hype doesn't live up to the expectation that we had already set for what WrestleMania hype should be, then naturally it'll always be seen as inferior, instead of just being different. Although, this is not to say that some things aren't just bad, because of course some things are. And furthermore than that, sometimes we accept a definition but on different levels. We might completely accept it, or we might partially accept it. And that exact amount of how much we do, well, can determine whether or not we think something is good or not. But that is gonna vary from person to person. However, what if both of those people were both you? Patreon shout out to the conductor of the hype train, Dakari Garmin, the man who built the house that WrestleMania build, Mr. J, the promotion with all the commotion, Ron Hawthorne, the hyperspace cowboy Mangy Stray, and Harry the Builder Flynn, as well as all my awesome patrons. You rule! When it comes to WrestleMania season, so many of us have fond memories of what it felt like when we were a kid. And it doesn't necessarily always matter of when you were a kid, because it always felt the same across the board. But we want to know, why doesn't it feel the same way anymore? Well, a lot of people think it's all a matter of time. A lot of us assume that WrestleMania hype back in the good old days was way longer than it is now. But as I pointed out in a prior video, the longest the hype train went from when the match was officially announced to the date of the show was less than 2 months, and at the shortest, it was barely more than 30 days. Again, watch that other video to find out more. And also remember, this was before the stipulation where the winner of the Royal Rumble would automatically go to WWE's WrestleMania to get a shot at the title. And while some would argue even though the date was officially set for the match at a certain time, the hype for it started way earlier, such as the Mega Powers exploding being set pretty much as soon as Masha won the title. But, as I pointed out, that sword does cut both ways, as The Rock and John Cena happened a year before the match actually happened. 2 if you're counting the following year's WrestleMania main event. Not to mention the 3 years that the Tribal Chief had. As specified, one of the biggest issues is that as a child, time seems to go by very slowly, and the older we get, the faster it goes by. And so, the hype might feel different to you not because it changed, but rather because you have. And so, the hard truth for a lot of wrestling fans is that we have to accept that, well, we've grown up, and things aren't going to feel like they did when we were a kid because we're not kids anymore. And we might crave that feeling, we might want it so badly, but we're just not going to get it. And it's not necessarily wrestling's fault why we don't have it, because the blame lies on what no wrestling fan wants to admit, ourselves. But let's not be too hasty here, because, well, it can't be entirely our faults. What if there is an actual qualitative difference between how wrestling is booked now versus how it used to be? If we're going to talk quality over quantity, now that is an entirely different argument, but it's one that's way harder to prove one way or the other. Now, whoever won the Royal Rumble, I would say it would be extremely difficult to live up to the hype of Cody Rhodes winning the WWE title and ending the Tribal Chief's reign, a reign of over 1,000 days. But for whatever reason, whether it was fan backlash on the internet for Jay winning the Rumble or outside circumstances, Jay didn't even main event night 1 or night 2. Instead, the big bout of the show went to John Cena versus Cody Rhodes. And the funny thing is, while last year a lot of fans were booing because of The Rock's involvement, fans this year were complaining that The Rock wasn't involved enough. You just can't win with some people, huh? Although, by accident or by design, I think it's safe to say that the hype last year was done better, even if we solely look at the fact that WWE was able to make an entire event out of Roman Reigns choosing his opponent. That was something that we didn't get to see for this WrestleMania. But nevertheless, seeing a 3-year-long title reign come crashing down is a lot of anticipation, a lot of promotion. However, it's not exactly more than getting to see somebody break the record of having 16 world titles, as the magnitude of both have a lot of historic value to them. Additionally, if your argument is that it's not just about the main event, but it was about everything else in the undercard, it's the entire show that you want better promoted, well, while that opinion is valid, let's also remember that in the undercard for this year was the Royal Rumble winner, as well as night 1 having a triple threat match between Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and CM Punk. Now, I'm not trying to get into the whole thing about whether or not night 1 WrestleMania main events count as main events, but my point of the matter is that there were plenty of matches on this card that still had a lot of hype behind it. And furthermore, while I was just praising the promotion for Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania Extra Large for being extra large, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody felt the same way. Because, in case you forgot, there were so many people out there whining that Cody should have just won it last year instead. And the problem with this WrestleMania season feel is that it is very fleeting and it is so variable from person to person. And most of all, we tend to forget about the hype after we get the results. Years from now, we're going to be talking about how John Cena won his 17th world title. We're not going to be talking about the build and how it made us feel. But what did you think of the WrestleMania hype this year? And do you think fans are just complaining for no good reason? Or is there something real behind it? Let me know down in the comments. And please make sure you're subscribed to the Thinking Fans channel right here at Dave Knows Wrestling. And please give this video a like. And oh yeah, those 2 videos that I talked about earlier, they are here to watch as well. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you to all my wonderful Patreons out there. And as always, Dave Knows.